Imagine this. A queen draped in priceless silks, adorned in pearls, commanding absolute power, yet surrounded by a cloud of bodily stench, so intense it made courtiers flinch. Her teeth, blackened, her wigs, crawling with lice, her skin, slowly rotting under layers of toxic lead makeup. This wasn't a peasant or prisoner. This was Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen of England. Behind the portraits and pageantry, Elizabeth was decaying in plain sight, and no one dared say a word. How could one of the most influential rulers in history go weeks, sometimes months, without bathing? Why did her beauty regimen involve lead, vinegar, and mercury? And how did her subjects come to see rot as a mark of royalty? The truth is worse than fiction, and a lot smellier. You've heard the legend of Gloriana. Now witness the stench behind the crown. To grasp the grim reality of Elizabeth I's hygiene, you first have to understand the world she ruled. In the late 1500s, sanitation was still in the Dark Ages. There was no running water, no soap as we know it, and no concept of germs. Instead, medical doctrine insisted that water could make you sick. Baths were thought to open the pores, allowing, quote, bad humors or pestilence to enter the body. Dirt, ironically, was seen as a protective barrier. This wasn't fringe science. It was conventional wisdom. Even among the poorest, hygiene was primitive at best. Chamber pots were emptied into the streets, and laundry was a seasonal affair. But while peasants had access to rivers and washed as needed, royalty followed stricter and filthier rituals, often rooted in status and superstition. Enter Elizabeth I, who reigned from 1558 to 1603. She was the most powerful woman in Europe, a political genius, and a symbol of English strength. Portraits depicted her as eternal, divine, untouched by age or death. But the reality under those gowns and powdered faces was far less divine. What follows is a tour through her personal routines, the fear of bathing, the sweet tooth that blackened her smile, the lethal cosmetics, and the perfume-soaked gowns hiding a body that rarely saw soap. This isn't about mocking Elizabeth. It's about unmasking the terrifying truth of what passed for royal hygiene in a world where status mattered more than cleanliness. Let's begin with how a queen's bath was more of a performance than a practice. Elizabeth I is often quoted as saying she bathed once a month, whether I needed it or not. In her time, that was not laziness, it was luxury. Medical texts of the 16th century advised against regular bathing. Physicians warned that water softened the body and made it vulnerable to disease. Nobility, including the queen, believed staying dry was staying safe. When Elizabeth did bathe, it wasn't convenient. There was no running water. A large wooden tub had to be brought to her chambers, filled with hot water by hand from kettles. There were no soaps with pleasant scents or skin benefits, just coarse, lye-based soap or mixtures of herbs and vinegar. But full immersion was rare. Her daily routine involved dry washing, wiping her body with linen cloths soaked in rose water or scented vinegar. This was meant more to mask odors than remove dirt. It was hygiene theater, ritualistic, perfumed, and utterly ineffective by modern standards. Clothing added to the problem. Elizabeth wore layered gowns made of velvet and brocade, materials that couldn't be easily cleaned. These were rarely washed and instead sprinkled with powders, crushed herbs, and floral oils. In short, Elizabeth's version of clean was based on avoiding water, absorbing sweat, and hiding the smell behind scent and silk. Elizabeth I adored sugar. And why wouldn't she? It was the ultimate symbol of wealth in her day, expensive, rare, and dangerously addictive. But with indulgence came consequence. By her later years, Elizabeth's teeth were black, rotting, and in some cases, simply gone. She suffered from chronic toothaches, infected gums, and a breath that was allegedly difficult to endure. One ambassador noted that her speech was muffled, as missing teeth and pain distorted her voice. There were no toothbrushes in the modern sense. Elizabeth used cloths, toothpicks, and pastes made from honey, salt, and herbs. Unfortunately, These did little to combat the decay caused by her sugary diet. Dentistry was brutal. Teeth were pulled using pliers by barbers or untrained surgeons, often without anesthesia. Clove oil or brandy might dull the pain, but most simply endured it. The most disturbing twist? Black teeth became fashionable. Members of the court began staining their own teeth to imitate the queen, associating dental decay with status. If Elizabeth's teeth were black, it meant she could afford sugar, so black teeth became aspirational. Her oral health wasn't just poor, it was weaponized as a mark of nobility. The irony is painful. The wealth that enabled her to eat luxuries also poisoned her, while her suffering set a grotesque trend among the nobility. And her face? That too was an illusion, crafted not with beauty products, but with lead and vinegar that would slowly eat away her flesh. Elizabeth's iconic white face was not a symbol of elegance. It was a chemical death mask. After surviving smallpox in 1562, she was left with facial scarring she refused to show. To hide it, she turned to Venetian ceruse, a foundation made from white lead mixed with vinegar. It gave her a smooth, pale complexion, admired by her subjects and immortalized in paintings. But it was also highly toxic. Daily use of ceruse led to skin corrosion, lesions, and hair loss. To smooth over the cracking layers of lead paint, Elizabeth applied egg whites, which dried stiff and peeled off in flakes, taking bits of skin with it. Despite the damage, she layered more on. Over time, her skin became pockmarked and sore, yet she refused to appear without it. By the end of her life, it was said she slept in makeup and refused to be seen unpainted, even by her closest ladies-in-waiting. To make matters worse, Elizabeth also used mercury-based elixirs, believed to cure blemishes. Instead, they only worsened her physical decline, contributing to tremors, weakness, and further skin deterioration. What began as a tool for concealment became a trap of dependence. She wasn't vain in the way we understand it today. Her survival as a female monarch depended on appearing unchanging, untouchable, immortal. But the cost was steep. The queen who ruled with unshakable confidence was slowly being poisoned by her own reflection. Still think that was the worst of it? By the mid-1580s, Elizabeth I was mostly bald. Her hair had thinned from age, illness, and the toxic effects of her beauty regimen. But no one could know that. She wore elaborate wigs, dozens of them, styled in fiery red curls to project youth and strength. These weren't the pristine, high-quality wigs you'd find today. They were heavy, poorly ventilated, and crawling with lice. Wig hygiene didn't exist. Instead of washing them, attendants doused them in oils and herbs. Lavender, rosemary, civet, musk, to mask the growing stink, but it only perfumed the infestation. Lice weren't confined to wigs. Elizabeth's entire wardrobe, layered, padded, unwashed, provided a perfect breeding ground. Servants often picked lice from her garments in private and even public settings. Historical accounts mention linens that crawled with life. Her clothing, made of velvets, satins, and brocades, was rarely washed. Water would damage the fabrics. Instead, her dresses were re-scented with spices and powders between wears. Underneath, Elizabeth wore linen shifts, changed more frequently, but even those were cleaned by beating and airing, not washing. The result? A monarch who appeared radiant from a distance, but who, up close, smelled of sweat, perfume, mildew, and decay. And still, she was revered. How? Why? That brings us to the final, most unsettling truth, not about her body, but about how illusion ruled more than hygiene ever could. It's easy to cringe at Elizabeth I's hygiene, but the deeper horror isn't that she lived in filth, it's that she thrived in it. Elizabeth wasn't some grimy outlier. She was emblematic of her era's elite. Bathing was feared, not favored. Water was dangerous. Perfumes were divine. The poor might wash in streams or rain barrels, but the rich believed too much cleanliness invited sickness. And somehow, in all this grime, Elizabeth built a myth. She ruled for 45 years. She survived assassination plots, foreign invasions, and internal rebellion. Her intellect, wit, and diplomacy redefined monarchy. But she also crafted something equally powerful, a visual persona. Even as she aged and ailed, she demanded to be seen as eternal and untouchable. In her final days, she reportedly stood for hours rather than lie down, afraid that dying would ruin her image. She refused to be undressed or have her makeup removed. She died not as a woman, but as a legend, fully costumed. That's the true stinking history. Behind the lead paint, the powdered wigs, and the putrid gowns, Elizabeth wielded the greatest weapon of all, perception. Her people never saw the sores. They saw the queen they needed, ageless, divine, and gloriously unreachable. In a time when filth was fate, she turned rot into reverence. So next time you admire a royal portrait, ask yourself, what did it smell like up close?